Today is May 29, 2021. Welcome to another S&P 500 analysis. This week we're going to take a look at the big picture of the market in addition to looking at the price action of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes and the market sentiment along with the internals. We're also going to follow up on gold, US dollar, and the interest rate. And then we're going to go and review the FAANG stocks and see how they are doing. So stay tuned. Now, many of you probably have heard of this soundbite, sell in May and go away. You heard that on CNBC and on the news media and social media, and everybody is tweeting this out and all these kind of stuff. But have you ever looked at the past performance and see, is this really true or not? Well, before we even go and take a look at the price action of the indexes and also the S&P 500, I want to dispel this myth from this talking head using this soundbite about sell in May and go away. Here is a monthly chart of the S&P 500, and what I did is I also mark off each month of May for the last 10 years. And this, I'm using the bar chart here, and for those that are unfamiliar with the bar chart, what the bar chart tells us is that green bar means it is a bar that has a gain from the previous bar, and the red bar is the one that has a loss from the previous bar. Okay, so let's start off with 2012. As you can see, back in 2012 in May, we have a monthly loss in May. And here is 2013. We saw a gain in May. Same with 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now, we didn't do that on 19. We actually have a loss. Okay, and then 20 and 21. So you could see from these last 10 years, there were only 2 May that actually ended with a loss. But the other 8 times, May actually closed with a gain. So 80% of the time, if you sell in May and go away, you actually have lost the opportunity to realize a gain. And so how is that really true for all these talking heads out there and all those people tweeting out to say sell in May, go away? It's just like those people, every time that we get a 200-point drop or something like that, or maybe a couple percentage drop in the S&P, they say, oh, Black Monday, and they don't even go back and understand what it really means. You know, what is Black Monday? Black Monday is a day that the Dow have lost 25% in a single day. Okay? It's not about losing 200 points. It's about losing 25%. All right, so anyway, so that's what I want to show you before we actually go and take a look at these individual price action. All right, this is for the S&P 500. Then you say, well, what about the technology? The technology really taking a pounding recently. Well, let's go and take a look at the NASDAQ 100. So here is the 10-year monthly chart of the NASDAQ 100. And again, see, we have 1, 2, 3. On 2019 month of May actually closed with a loss, and same with 2018 and also 2012. But all the other months, well, also 2019, the month that we're ending now, also with a loss. So we have 4 out of 10. That is still 60% of the time. May is actually ended up with a gain. So since we are looking at all these indexes on a monthly basis and see what this myth about sell in May and go away perform, how it has been performed. So let's start off and look at the other indexes as well. Let's start with the transportation. Once again, looking at this transportation, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of 10 is actually, with a loss in May. But 6 out of 10 actually ended with a gain. And looking at the Dow Jones Industrial, 1, 2. So 8 out of 10, we have a gain in May. Well, let's go and take a look at the Russell 2000. The Russell 2000, 1, 2, 3, 7 out of 10 ended May with a gain. So where is this sell in May and go away nonsense make sense? So I just want to dispel this myth about selling in May and go away. Okay, as you can see, this is a game of probability, and the odds is actually favors the month of May to end up with a gain. If you look at the big picture and look at the last 10 years. So let's go and take a look at the weekly performance of the S&P 500. On this weekly chart of the S&P 500, you can see that it is still hovering inside of this wedge pattern here, and it is also above this 10-week and 40-week moving average. And the range for last week was 48.2 points, and it gained 34.19 points, or 0.82%. So there's nothing wrong with this chart of breaking the trend, and on a weekly basis, the trend is still up. And if you take a look at the most likely probability is the S&P 500 is working on getting up to this all-time high, and most likely it could go up and make a new all-time high before it break this wedge. But of course, anything is possible when something can come out over the weekend, especially this long weekend, that it could just gap down on the next session and start breaking this wedge and work its way down. But we'll take a look at that later on in this video when we analyze the price action of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes in a little bit more detail. Now let's go and take a look at the market sentiment and also the internals and see what they are telling us. Looking at this sentiment chart here, you can see the VIX actually came down, way down from the 20 level. Remember a couple of weeks ago, it was actually up at the 30, and it spiked up to the 30 and then came back in. Right now, as of Friday, it closed at 16.76. So it is coming down to that 14 level that we seen, back in before the pandemic. And right now, the put call ratio is back again underneath the 0.75 level and sitting at 0.53. So obviously, this chart is telling us the market participants are risk on once again, and they are getting complacent. So we've got to keep an eye on this, bullishness. And when it get too extreme, then we could see a little bit of a reversal reaction in the market. And looking at the New York Stock Exchange up-down volume ratio last Friday, it was actually negative 1.28. In other words, there were 1.28 times more down volume than up volume. But the S&P 500 actually eked out a small gain of a little bit over 3 points. And the advanced decline, the advancer led the decline on Friday by 670. And on Friday, the new high, new low, the new 52-week high outnumbered the 52-week low by 201. And here's the story. Look at the advanced decline line, the cumulative advanced decline line for the New York Stock Exchange. These are all the stock traded in the New York Stock Exchange. The advanced decline has actually continued to climb to a new high, while the S&P 500 is still underneath this all-time closing high that was made on May 7. What the advanced decline line is telling us, and there's a good likelihood that we could see the all-time closing high from the S&P 500. And let me remind you, there's a all-time high from the E-mini S&P 500 that was put in on a Globex session a few weeks back. So that is also in the past kind of a good indication of what the S&P 500 will do, because that Globex all-time high need to be tagged in order to validate that all-time high to be legitimate. So to kind of give us some idea that the S&P 500 will also likely to put in a new all-time high when the E-mini S&P 500 go up there to tag that Globex all-time high. Look at the NASDAQ market. On Friday, the NASDAQ 100 closed up a little bit over 28 points, and the up-down volume ratio was positive 1.7 in favor, basically it's in favor of the up volume, 1.7 times more up volume than down volume. And the daily advanced decline with the advancer leading the decliner by a margin of 216. And there were 139 more new 52-week high than new 52-week low in the NASDAQ market on Friday. And here, looking at the NASDAQ cumulative AD line, although it did not make a new high like the New York Stock Exchange cumulative AD line, but one thing to note is that it actually broke above this pivot high here. And if you note that on this pivot high on the NASDAQ 100, Friday's NASDAQ 100 close is actually below this pivot high close back on May 7th. So that kind of gives us a little bit of a positive divergence on the short term. And also on the longer term, you look at this trend line here, it actually broke above this downtrend, right, on the advanced decline, cumulative advanced decline line. So that is also kind of give us a little clue that the NASDAQ market internal, the advanced decline might be, regathering strength. So wouldn't be surprised to see the NASDAQ 100 continue to push up and take out this pivot high, and it could, start moving back up toward the all-time highs again. So we just have to keep an eye on that. So looking at the internals and also the sentiment, it's clearly telling us the market participant might get a little bit too euphoric or getting too bullish. So we got to be a little bit cautious about this little bullishness getting out of hand, that we could see a little bit of a negative reaction or pullback from the market. But if we notice the advanced decline, in the New York Stock Exchange making a new high, and also in the NASDAQ market is actually, coming up, breaking out some of these, key level, that we see that it could be regathering, or doing some sort of regrouping of internal strength to push the market up a little bit further higher, and before we see a little bit more substantial pullback. By no means, we are not near the top yet. But when the market makes a top, we will know. But at this time, it is not telling us that a top is in. All we know right now is based on a couple of the messages that we got from the market telling us that we could see a new high on the S&P 500 and also a new high on the Dow Jones Industrial. Doesn't tell us anything about the NASDAQ or the Russell 2000. So we just have to keep an eye on the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial for clues. All right, now let's go and take a look at the price action of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes in a little bit more detail, and then see what are some of the scenarios that we could expect for the coming week. Looking at this daily chart of the S&P 500, you can see on Monday, last Monday, had a nice big update. And other than that, it's pretty much just grinding up for the rest of the week, right? Not much happening. And it's just kind of hovering right underneath this upper price channel trend line. So, but what we could see here, if in the coming week, is the possibility of moving up and get above this trend line here and possibly test this all-time high. The other thing that I want to show is if we just kind of draw a little bit of a Fibonacci retracement here. You see this pullback, it came down almost 50% pullback, or came down to a little bit of a over 33% pullback. So came down and got a nice bounce and retest this level. Then, the 618 got the, and then pushed back up. This is around the 4,060 area here. And right now it is trying to get up and break above this 100%. So taking out this high here, if we could take out this high, which is somewhere around 4238.04, then we could see it move up to possibly, even up at the 4,300 level, above the 4,300 level at the 127. It is somewhere around 4342. Okay, so just kind of bear that in mind, that if it break above this trend line here, there's a good possibility we could see an all-time high, or at least the current all-time high get tested and possibly put in a new all-time high and run up to the 4,300 level. Now on the downside, we could see it come back down and fill this gap here there is a small gap here, and this level here is somewhere around 41.15 area. So it could come down to this 41.21 to 41.15 and fill this gap, then possibly come back down and retest this 40.60 area once again. But if that is going to occur the third time, then most likely we probably see it come back down to this 40.20 area and even down at the 39.74. Because we still have this gap right above this 40.20 to get fill. So if that's if the S&P 500 decide to pull back, and we're going to be first is to watch this gap. If this gap got taken out, then we'd be watching this these low here around 40.50, 40.60 area. And if that doesn't hold, then we're going to see that 40.20 could be tested with this gap being filled. Okay? And then on the upside, we essentially are looking for an all-time high. Simple as that. And here on the NASDAQ, remember last video, I was saying that keep an eye on this 13,713. If we could get above this and get above this pivot high here, then the all-time high could be back in play. Right now, it is trying to get above this 13,713. So we're going to keep an eye on it next week to see what it be able to actually get above it and stay above it. Then watch this pivot high here. But if it pulls back, then look for this level 13,280, get retested and possibly come down and test this 13,000 level. So similarly to the S&P 500, if it can't hold these low here, then it will likely come back down and test this 12,786. Now also looking at this Fibonacci extension, and if we use this, put it here, and you can see that it came down a little bit more than 50% and got a nice bounce here and bouncing out of this retracement zone. So we'll be looking for the possibility of moving up to this 100% level, and that would be the all-time high, somewhere around 14,073.48. And if we're going to use that for as a guide to see what are the potential higher level target, and the 127 will put this NASDAQ 100 up at 14,584. The Russell 2000 also made a little bit of a movement toward this 2795, 2796 area. So right now we're basically looking at it to see could it come up and take out of this trend line here and move above this 2296. And if we could get up, essentially getting above the 2300 level, if we could get above to 2300 level, then we could see this all-time high back in play, and that would put it back at the level somewhere around 2360.20. But if it reverts back down, then once again, we essentially are looking at this 2195 and the 2075. So on the downside, potential support level hasn't changed. So we're still watching this 2397 or 2300. Looking at this Dow Jones Transportation, as you can see, it broke out of this downward trend line and appeared that it could be making its way back up to the 16,000 level, and that could test the current all-time closing high once again. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that to see would it be able to come back up to the 16,000 level. But if it reverts back down, then we'd be watching this 15,000 level for potential support. And for the Dow Jones Industrial, see on Monday, it finally broke above this upper price channel trend line, kind of chopped around for, around a couple of days. Then on Thursday, it broke above it and closed above it. And on Friday, also stay above that at the close. And right now, we're basically watching this gap here. If this gap gets filled, then the all-time closing high will be in play, and very likely that it could be, taken out, because the Dow theory is still in play. So the expectation is for the Dow Jones Industrial to come up and make a new closing high. But if it decides to pull back, then the first level of potential support will be around this 33,500, essentially these lows here. And if these low doesn't hold, then we essentially are looking for this 33,000 to be tested and also fill this small gap here. Now let's take a look at the 10-year interest rate and see what it did last week. Remember, we were saying that we expect this 10-year yield to be fluctuate between this 15.3 or 1.53 to 1.76%, fluctuate between this zone here. And it didn't do much. It's basically still inside of this range here. And last week came down on Friday at 1.58. And also for the US dollar, we were saying that we expect it to just bounce around between this 89.74 to 91.24. So just bouncing around in this zone. So right now it just kind of sitting right near the bottom of this zone here, and close on Friday at 89.99. And for silver, we're basically looking for silver to inch its way up to this $29.50 level here. So it's didn't do too much last week. It just kind of chopped around this $29 level. If it does pull back, then we probably see a little bit of a test for support somewhere around 26.67. And if it continue to inch higher, then we are looking for this potential target level of 29.50. And for gold, ever since it broke out of this downward trend line here, making a move toward the 1923, and I'm saying that it could come down and do a little bit of a consolidation somewhere around here. So I'm still looking for a little bit of a pause before it push up above this 1923, and possibly come up and test this pivot high here somewhere around 1963 level. The high here is 1962.50. So that's basically what I'm looking at, is to see would it be able to just do a little bit of a consolidation, since it made a nice moves ever since that, came off of this, sort of a double bottom pattern here, and also kind of zigzagging, broke this trend line, and seemed like a non-stop run up. So basically looking to see it could, do a little bit of a consolidation and then bring in some fresh buyer, and then push this thing up at the 1923.70 level and work its way up to this 1963. Now let's review the FAANG stock. First, looking at the FAANG index here. Remember, we are talking about these low here to see would it be able to hold support. In a period last week, it was able to hold above this support and make a little move toward this downward trend line. So we're essentially monitoring these level here. If it could make a break above this trend line here, this downward trend line, then that would certainly help the case for the NASDAQ 100 to push toward the all-time high. But then again, if it pulls back and break below this support, then we could see the technology sector be under some selling pressures. And we look at the on a daily basis, you can see that it is moving upward nicely last week and inching up to this level here, somewhere around 6,666. Last week, we were looking at Facebook and watching the 315 level, and we're saying if it could break above this 315, then we'd be watching this all-time high above 331 to possibly be tested. As you can see on this weekly chart, Facebook actually came up and took out the all-time high and put in a new all-time high. And looking at Facebook daily chart, we see that pulled back a little bit on Friday. It made a new high on Thursday. So right now, essentially the support level on any kind of pullback, we'd be watching this 315 area here. But if it continue to push up, and let's put in our Fibonacci retracement tool. And if we take this here, it came down to the 618 and got a nice bounce off of that. So if we are looking at this 127, then the next potential target could be $354, $355 level. And for Apple, we're saying watch the trend line here for potential pullback. And if it breaks this trend line, then we're essentially looking for Apple to possibly pull back to this 107. right now we essentially continue to watch the see would it be able to hold this trend line and make us move back up to this 137.88 level. And looking on the daily chart here, we see that it is pulling back toward the trend line. So the thing to watch next week is essentially to see would it be able to hold this trend line. And if it doesn't, then there's this low volume node here somewhere around 117.81. So keep an eye on that level first. If it doesn't get a bounce off of that, then there's a good possibility it's going to work its way down to this 107.72. And for Amazon, basically I was talking about that it's been chopping around within this zone here for quite a number of months. And also I tweeted out this chart here with a little bit of a potential bear flag and got some target value here, target level. So we're basically still watching for Amazon to possibly pull back to this 2980 area, 2980, and might even get down to this 2871. And looking at the daily chart here, you can see that it is forming a little bit of a bull flag. And if it breaks down and there is a high volume node here somewhere around 3172. So watch for a little bit of a bounce off of there. And if it continue to break through and dip below this 3174, then I'll be watching for this 2980, and that is in confluence near the 80% major move of the breakdown of this bear flag here. Now, if it could reverse and get back above the 3271, then the level of resistance that I'll be watching will be 3434. On Netflix, pretty much the same situation as Amazon. We'll basically was watching this zone here that it's been balancing for many months, and we're basically looking to see will Netflix come back down to this lower zone area. Then maybe watch for some possible bounce to do a little bit of a swing trade back up toward the 572. So right now we are still watching for that possibility for this thing to pull back down to this 478.63, and if that doesn't hold, then ultimately come down to this 463, this low volume zone here. So if it could remain above the or stay above the 503 level here, then we can see this huge gap could be in play and get filled. If that this gap gets filled, then we'd be looking at this 572.49. But right now I'm basically watching for this to pull back. Look for a trade location for a swing trade back up toward the 572. And for Google, we're saying that Google looked the strongest out of all the FAANG stock last week. Right now it's moving toward the all-time high here. Booked this 2337 resistance, still holding above this ascending trend line here. And also looking at the daily price chart, remember we were saying that if it could break above this low volume zone at 2337, then we'd be basically watching Google to come up and test the all-time high of 2431.38. So right now it broke above the 2337. We'll see we'll be able to hold above that. It could come down and do a little bit of a back test before it pushes up. But if it come back down to dip below this zone here, this low volume zone, we could see it come down and possibly test this these area here where this high volume zone is, for a little bit of a chop, essentially testing this trend line here for potential support. So right now it's appeared that we're looking for Google to try to come up and test the all-time high. But if it does decide to pull back and break below this trend line, then this 2193 will be the potential support level that I'd be keeping an eye on, because this is right at the edge of this low volume zone here. We also looked at Twitter last week. We're saying Twitter doesn't look that good, but right now it seems to be coming up to this 5763 resistance level, and also it popped back above this trend line here. So the things to watch is would it be able to hold this 5763 and get above it and work its way back up to this 74.96, or will it reverse back down, break the trend line once again, and come back down to this 49.11. So looking at the daily chart, right, we see that it is testing this 57.63 area right now. So if we could get to this low volume zone here, then we could see it move up and possibly encounter some resistance at this 66.91 level here, and see would it be able to come to and get up to this 74.96. But if it reverse back down, break this trend line, and come back into this high volume area, then I'd be watching for Twitter to come back down to this 49.11 and possibly test these low here to see would it be able to find support here. We also looked at Nvidia last week. We're talking about Nvidia, similar type of situation with Amazon and Netflix been chopping around, balancing in this area here between 475.5 to 591 for many months. And we're saying that it could be forming a little bit of a bull flag, and it could be breaking out to this bull flag with earnings coming up. We could see it possibly come up and test the all-time high and put in a new all-time high. So let's go and take a look at the daily price action here. You see that the earning came out and make a nice pop and came up and took out the all-time high here. So, so definitely there's more upside momentum for Nvidia. And if we take a look at this, just take a look at this 100% move here. Let me get the extension just to measure this move. Okay, from this zone here to do a 1x. And we'd be looking at Nvidia 721. If we do a Fibonacci extension on this, I mean Fibonacci retracement. See, it came down to this retracement zone and pop out, and now it broke above this 100% level. So we could see at 127, somewhere around the 700 level, which is 696, 697 area for Nvidia. And we also looked at AMD last week, and we're saying AMD need to hold above this 74.20. And if we could hold above that and also possibly take out this downward trend line here, then we could see it possibly come up to this 89.72. Now, last week, apparently you have a upgrade on the price target. So that's kind of gave it a little bit of a momentum, a little bit of a push on the upside here. So let's take a look at the daily price action. See AMD bounce off of this 74.20, did a little bit of a consolidation. Now it's pushing up on that price target upgrade. So right now we'll see would it be able to come up to this 89.72, or would it reverse back down and retest this 74.20. Once again, if it break this 74.20, remember we were talking about that possibility of a head and shoulder pattern. It did not break that, this neckline here. So it doesn't mean that it could not reverse back down and break this support level of 74.20. Then I'll be looking at these level here as the next potential support at $64 and $59.49. Those are the two levels to keep an eye on if it moves below 74. And also looking at Tesla, remember we were talking about coming back up to this 595. It could come back up to this 595. It could potentially make it back up to this 715 area. But also again, we are looking at this trend line here as well. If it come up and could not get above this trend line, reverse back down, then we could see this 595 could get retested, because it basically broke out of this, this little bit of a resistance level here. And if it doesn't hold this 595, I'm still looking for it to come back down to this zone here at this 539.49 area. So we'll see, would it be able to get above this trend line. If it could get above this trend line, then yeah, we'll be looking at this 715.47 level and see would it take out of this downward trend line here. And for Alibaba, we're saying that Alibaba is putting in a series of lower high, lower low. And we're essentially looking for Alibaba to come down to this 199 area here in this zone if it break this low here. So right now it seems to getting a little bit of a bounce up here in this high volume area. And there's this trend line, this descending trend line. So it could come up to this 229 area possibly, and before it encounter resistance, or if it just reverses back down, then we're still looking at this 196 area for next potential support. This is a little bit of a low volume indentation out of this big high volume area here. Also on BIDU, we're talking about BIDU, there's a little bit of a blow off, right? So right now it got a little bit of a bounce off of 177.58, and that could maybe push it up to 228.53, but I'd be watching for it to come back down, make a series of lower low, lower high, and come down to this 151 area. So looking at this daily price chart, we could see a little bit of a low volume zone here that it could come up here and get a rejection, essentially up near the 200 level, and possibly get pushed back down to this 177.58. But if we could get to that, then we basically are looking at this possibility of somewhere around the 219, 220 area, and then this 228. So right now it's still pretty much hands off unless it come down here and get a nice bounce. Then maybe could take a little bit of a stab for a swing long to get back up to the 228. But if you come up here near the 228, get a little bit of a reversal rejection, maybe take a little bit of a swing short to play it back down to this 175. So essentially just trade within this zone here and see would it break above or break below. Okay, I got a request for a couple stock here. One is JD.com here, and looking at the weekly of JD.com, see it came down to this 66.98, got a nice little bounce off of here, put in an inside week last week. So got some level here on the upside at 76.76 and 81.74. Let's take a look at the daily price action. It appears that it got bounced off of this low volume zone here, okay, and right now it's getting back into this high volume area. So if it could chop around and move up here, then it could make it back up to this area somewhere around the 92, 93 area. But there are quite a few of these potential resistance before that, and one is at this 76.76 and 81.74. So keep an eye on these level here. But if it decide to reverse back down and take out this 66.98, then watch this low volume area here, and that could take it down below 60. And the other request is Tencent, and Tencent is getting a little bit of a bounce off of this hammer weekly candle here. Got a little bit of a fake move here, okay, and right now seems to be coming back up. So we'll be keeping an eye on 82.28. This edge of this high volume area, and if it could get back above it, then we could see maybe it could come back up to this 85 area. But if it reverse back down, come back down below this 74.19, then we'd be keeping an eye out for this 64.11. And looking at the daily chart here, you can see that this is the zone here that we'll be watching. Right, so it's 82.28 on the upside, and on the downside is 74.19. So if we come break below this low zone here, then we be chopping down for the 64.11. But if we could break above the 82.28, then there is a little bit of a high volume zone here. So that would at least put it up at this 87.5 to 90 area. Right, so but still got a way to go. And right now it's sitting right at this near this high volume zone here. So we'll see will this thing be able to make a move on the upside or come back down and retest the 74 area. So that's it for this week. Hopefully you are enjoying the long weekend, And be sure to smash that thumbs up for me to help me promote and share this video. Thank you for watching and stay safe.